Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, I want to talk to you guys about the top 5 meta strategies going into set 11 Vermilion Bloodline. It is pre-release weekend. I hope your guys' locals are open and available for you guys to get some early product. But being pre-release weekend, I thought it was time to start talking about some of the meta trends we may see going into set 11. This is not like a structured tier list. This is not like my top deck to my bottom deck. More of a general look at some of the top trends that I think and my team thinks that we're going to see going into set 11. So with that being said, guys, if you are new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. If you want to help the channel out, there are lots of ways down in the description to do so. Make sure to check out the Gemmy app and the Patreon for your one-on-one coaching, as well as your cross-world competitive content. If you guys need sleeves, deck boxes, binders, any of that stuff, go use Dex Protection down there. And finally, guys, if you want to buy or pre-order the cards you see in today's video, be sure to use my link in the description to TCG Player. All that stuff really helps out a lot, guys. I do appreciate each and every one of you that supports the channel in that way. That being said, let's get started. So the first strategy we're talking about is blue, and blue is probably one of the most generic strategies in Dragon Ball Super. Most of the time when you look at a mono blue deck, it's really just 50 of the best blue cards in the game that you can play, and then there are a few things here and there that are different, you know, for each respective leader that you choose to play. And honestly, guys, there are more leaders to talk about than just what's on the screen here. I mean, this is really just for a lack of space. These are the 4 leaders I decided to include. So Vegito and Zamasu, they're coming back from set 10 with a force. They did get a little bit of support in set 11, namely Vegito getting the 1-drop blocker Oob. That card really just fits the strategy perfectly. So basically before that, you had to rely on Dr. Rhoda and sometimes Jill Call from the draft box 5 to get your leader flipped. Now, once you do get flipped and you play Oob, assuming you have a Unison in play, when you play it, you get the draw 1, and Vegito absolutely loves blockers even when he's already awakened, because he basically turns every single blocker into a draw 1. Like, blocking an attack like that and then plussing off of that is a really strong effect. One of the reasons why Vegito's been able to stay meta relevant for so long. And it doesn't seem like he's really slowing down in set 11. That's a great piece of support that he's gotten. Do I think he'll be the best blue deck in set 11? Not quite the best blue deck. I do still think he'll be in and out of the meta, though, and that's what we've seen for the past few weeks in, you know, towards the end of the set 10 meta, is that Vegito's been in and out, Zamasu's been in and out, Soul Striker even was in and out, and I think we'll continue to see that kind of like a revolving door of all these different blue decks going into set 11. But next up, we have to talk about Zamasu. Zamasu is relatively unchanged going into set 11. I mean, it can play some of the stuff in set 11, like the SS4 Vegeta Rise of the Super Warrior. That's definitely a card that Zamasu can play because Zamasu does ramp to some degree, and that's definitely a good card in certain ramp builds. But Zamasu as a leader just offers a lot of unrivaled value that other leaders just don't have access to, like the dual attack draw 1, not being a once per turn on that draw 1 lets this leader generate so much value. But I think there's a little bit of conflict when it comes to deck building in Zamasu, because like Vegito, you really do want to depend on that Zeno Unison, because it just synergizes so well with your deck. Like in Vegito, getting that turn 3 Obuni is great. Playing Zeno and then losing an energy and then playing the free Android 16 blocker is also a great synergy for the deck. And then in Zamasu, you need to pop off your energy in order to either dual attack or bottom deck one of your opponent's threats. And that's a really integral part of Zamasu. It's probably more integral to Zamasu than it even is to Vegito. But with that being said, Baby the Unknown Parasite is another great Unison coming out in set 11. +2, draw 1, -5, give your leader plus 15k double strike, and you can activate blue counters from your hand without paying energy cost by discarding 2 cards. That's another great thing that Zamasu can take advantage of, because putting that 15k double strike on a dual attack leader that will draw twice, that's a really powerful synergy. But again, I think there is a bit of a conflict there when it comes to using Zeno versus Baby. It'll probably be some sort of combination. I bet you that a lot of players will play Zamasu. They'll play Zeno in the early game, and then later on they may even just pay 5 for the Baby, get the -5 off, and then they'll have access to their free counters. So in a way, it doesn't even really matter that they tapped out, if that makes sense, because, you know, your golden grade 8 Baby counter is going to be free of energy. So with that being the case, I think Zamasu looks really interesting going into set 11. But now we have to talk about the set 11 blue leaders, because of course we're going into set 11 and we're getting new blue leaders, and they're looking to be pretty powerful. So SS4 Vegeta is really interesting. So going into some of the more recent sets, they banned a lot of ramp stuff, namely Objection. World Peace no longer allows you to play the Whis from the drop area to ramp you a permanent energy. Permanent ramp is something that we see in very specific archetypes, and then we get something generic like Zeno that only works for mono blue leaders, and it's not a permanent ramp. So if they ever remove the Zeno, you're losing that ramp. But SS4 Vegeta somewhat gets around that by having its own inherent ramp effect, but it's not a consistent ramp effect, and that's going to be a problem for Vegeta. Vegeta does look strong going into set 11, I will say that. Getting a blue deck with an excess amount of energy is a really powerful thing, but it's going to be tough in certain matchups to get that excess amount of energy. For example, when you play against decks that have a lot of negates inherently, that especially ones that replace themselves or ones that put bodies on the board where your opponent isn't necessarily just losing a card by negating your leader attack, they're either going even or sometimes even plussing in that regard. There are other matchups like Zamasu and Vegito actually that awaken very, very early, and Vegeta has a problem doing damage to those leaders. And you do have cards in the main deck to counteract that. You're probably playing 4 copies of UI Kamehameha Goku because it draws one on when you use it on your turn, and it boosts your leader to a 25k on the unawakened side, and turn 1, turn 2, no one's really out comboing that. I think the Golden Great Ape Unison is a great card to play in Vegeta, even though it got errated to draw 2 cards by paying 4 instead of 2 energy. That is kind of unfortunate, but I really think that's just like a mana sink effect, an effect you'll only use in like a situation where you don't have anything to use your energy on. I think the +1 of that card, giving your leader plus 10k to ensure that you ramp, is much more of the reason why you would play that card. So I do think Vegeta's looking good going into set 11. I do think it has its bad matchups. I'm not quite ready to call it the best blue leader in the set, but I think it is, you know, kind of in that running to possibly be that. And then Baby Spirit of the Tuffles, this is the one blue deck that we finally look at, and it's not just like the best blue cards in the game deck. It has its own archetype, it has its own identity. You're basically just playing all the counters in the world. And what's crazy about this leader is it comes with a field card that starts in play Planet Tuffle. When you put the leader down, you just start with the field card in play, and it makes all blue counters -1 cost. And that gets really, really crazy when you look at cards like Mechiorp from Draft Box 5. You look at cards like Mafuba from, what was it, set 1 or set 2, that, you know, become 1 cost. These cards become a lot more powerful as 1 cost. Then you have a card like Gohan Baby's Minion. I think that'll be a great main deck / side deck card in most of these blue decks for very specific matchups. But in Baby, you automatically slam like 3 or 4 copies of it because it's a 2-drop, you know, kind of watered down topo, but still for a 2-drop 25k that floodgates your opponent out of attacking, that's looking very strong. So I think you can kind of hurdle Vegeta, Zamasu, and Vegito into like their own category of just generic blue cards, but Baby really does have its own identity. And if you really want to play a hardcore control deck, Baby's looking to be quite powerful going into set 11. But the 2 other leaders I want to mention, where you're talking about just the blue best cards in the game, I want to talk about SS3 Reboot, and I want to talk about Soul Striker. I couldn't quite fit them on the page here because we're pretty full as it is, but those are 2 leaders that you should not forget about. SS3 Reboot is looking to be quite powerful because SS4 Vegeta Rise of the Super Warrior is essentially a 3-drop draw 4 in that deck, and that's a very, very powerful synergy that we've been having a lot of success with in testing. I do want you guys to be aware of that. Soul Striker as a generic mono blue leader is looking to be quite good as well, but he really gains a lot of ground from Baby the Unknown Parasite, because if you don't know, Soul Striker Reboot is allowed to awaken when you play a 3-cost blue Unison. So whenever a new 3-cost blue Unison comes out, you definitely want to be on the lookout for Soul Striker. And Soul Striker synergy with Baby the Unknown Parasite is looking to be quite strong. So blue was one of the strongest colors going from last set. It's still looking to be very, very good in set 11. Next up, guys, let's talk about green. Green is in an interesting place because for the first time we're in set 11, we're really getting green archetypes that are meant to be built within themselves, and we haven't seen that in a long time. I mean, green has very, very seldom been meta in the Dragon Ball Super card game, but in set 10 it found a pretty good place in the meta. It was really dominant in the beginning of the format, then in the middle it was kind of like nowhere to be found, but towards the end green kind of found its place again with the combination of Dredge Goku and Clash of Fates Goku. I think these decks will continue to do well because I do think green good card deck is a very, very good build, but now when you introduce Gotenks and Majin Vegeta into the mix, things get shaken up a bit. So Gotenks looking to be quite powerful as a hand control build because a ton of its boss monsters just have deflect. You really can't interact with them, and that's one of the things that these green good card decks with the Super Saiyan Gokus here, that's one of the things that they lacked. Sometimes they could struggle against blue with God-Sling Technique Trunks because they didn't have a lot of deflect in the main deck. You'd be playing like the Maiden Transformation Engine, you'd be trying to use that to play 2 Maidens from the drop area, but those cards did not have deflect, so they would be relatively susceptible to specific counterplays. Gotenks fixes that problem because you have a card like Grim Reaper of Justice, which is an insane battle card, 2 energy, plop it down, 25k dual attack barrier. Upon removal, you get some pluses off of it. It's just an insanely strong card with deflect. That's going to be the key thing there. Now, of course, we have counterplays that get around deflect, so I'm not saying it's going to be like tier 0 or anything. And in the mirror match specifically, Frieza Charismatic Villain is a great card that answers that against yellow, for example. SS4 Vegeta Primal Transformation is another great card that deals with Grim Reaper. But I'm just saying that now green has a lot more tools at its disposal that can get around certain counterplays that they were not able to get around before. Majin Vegeta, I think, is a different case because it's a super aggressive deck that I think is going to be very powerful early on in the format, but I think as time goes on, Vegeta may adjust to more of a mid-range deck because the deck can play a little bit later. The leader actually can be very aggressive because he takes life gains double strike, but he can also deal with unisons quite well, and that can help you transition into a mid game quite smoothly. So I do think each of these decks and leaders is going to have a spot in the meta somewhere, and I think, again, we might see a revolving door, but if I had to say, I think Gotenks will be the one we see most consistently. But again, time will tell as we get into it. Yellow's not too powerful in set 10. It doesn't seem too crazy going into set 11 either. It seems good, don't get me wrong. You know, we've seen over the course of the set 10 tournaments, yellow's been in, yellow's been out. Gotenks has been in, Sin's been out, and vice versa. I think we'll really just continue to see that because yellow didn't get too many crazy upgrades in set 11. Garlic honestly is a little bit unimpressive. It seems interesting, it does some pretty cool stuff, but I don't think it's quite meta worthy because it just relies a little bit too much on putting things onto the board, like putting a lot of battle cards onto the board to get your Nimbus type card online, but you know, they don't really have a lot of protection in those cards, so that might fall off to the wayside. I do think Skillless Gohan has potential, mostly for the fact that it just draws a ton of cards. We've seen decks in the past that just draw near infinite cards. They usually do pretty well, so I've been testing Skillless Gohan a lot. I think it's going to be quite strong, but I think the jury is still a bit out on where yellow will stand. But Sin is getting a lot of cool support in set 11, namely the Freeze Shenron that searches basically any of your negative energy Dragon Balls. That seems quite strong for the deck. Gotenks, I think, pretty much stays unchanged, but Gotenks will be that leader where you can experiment with red yellow, you can experiment with green yellow, blue yellow, mono yellow. If there is, you know, any upgrade in those types of strategies, Gotenks is going to be the leader that sees play with those archetypes. Next up, guys, we have to talk about Black. Black was one of the most controversial decks in all of set 10 because of Vegex. Vegex was just so powerful. It really dominated the format, and going into set 11, it's seeing a big nerf with the Bibbidi nerf. So Vegex seems to be taken down quite a few notches. I will definitely agree that Bibbidi is nowhere near as powerful as it once was, and I do think players will stop playing Bibbidi and they'll play the new Vegeta Super Combo coming out in set 11. But with that being said, I think Vegex still does a lot of stuff better than some of the Black leaders we're getting in set 11. The set 11 stuff is really focused around Overrealm, and that's really cool. There are some pretty neat leaders, especially SS4 Goku. I think is quite strong with his ability to gain power from cards in the warp. But what's better than one free card per turn via Overrealm? Well, Vegex playing multiple free cards per turn, just being a mill leader and having the time agents at its disposal. So I think Vegex will still be the best Black deck going for like a drop area type strategy going into set 11, but I guess, you know, time will tell on that. Skillless doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. Again, a lot like Skillless Gohan, it's just one of those decks that generates so much advantage that it's going to be kind of hard to kick it out of the meta. I mean, it got a lot of great support in Anniversary Box 2020 with the Unison just pumping out Skillless from the deck, as well as the Goku Android 8 Bonds of Battle. Excellent support. It seems like it's not really going anywhere. And again, this deck will just continue to smash blue as long as they rely on Zeno Cosmic Unison. So definitely something to look forward to. Although moving into set 11 Black support, I do think Dark Broly is looking to be very powerful. It's looking to be actually a really good tier 1 budget deck, which I'm actually quite excited about because, you know, coming from like set 9 and Surge format, it was very expensive to play the game when we came from a really cheap place in the beginning of the game's lifespan. Coming back into set 10, set 11, we've gotten a lot of good reprints, and we get really good archetypes like Broly that are pretty much self-contained. A lot of the good cards that are not from the archetype, like Mirror Critter Absorb, Fu Shrouded Mystery, have been reprinted into Oblivion, so those are really easy to get. So it seems like Dark Broly is going to be very strong going into set 11, a tier 1 budget deck that I'm excited for players to pick up on because I do want the game to be accessible to as many players as physically possible. And finally, guys, moving into Red, it looks like Red's going to be very good going in set 11, and I think one of the things that held it back in set 10, which we didn't really see much Red at all in set 10, I think that had a lot to do with Koitsukai because Vegex was the most dominant deck in the format. You saw a lot of Koitsukai in the main deck, but I think with Black being a little bit toned down in set 11, I think red's gonna have a really good place, and I think we're looking at red good card deck. I think Yamcha is a leader for that because he looks at the top 2, adds any red card that you need. That gives you some unrivaled consistency when you're just looking for, you know, a good red card at a given moment. It could be Topo, it could be Android 17 Rebel from Draftbox 5, it could be SSP Goku Concentrated Destruction. Yamcha just fetches all of those and filters through the deck quite well. But when you're looking at more archetypal red decks, I think Broly and Gogeta are both looking quite good. Broly, I've been playing it a lot. It's very fast, very aggressive, does a lot of things very quickly, puts a ton of pressure on. And yeah, you know, a lot of people say that aggressive decks will fall off as the format continues. That might be the case, but Broly has protection for his chain, which is quite good. And he has some other tools at his disposal, like Bardock the Resolute and the new King Piccolo coming out in Draft Box 6, that I think will actually help him out quite a bit. Gogeta, it does what it does consistently. Basically, every turn 3, turn 4, you're going to play that Gogeta fusion, board white -15 everything, go into your 6-drop Gogeta. Hopefully that survives. Then you go into either your secret rare or your 8-drop Gogeta from set 6. It's not too flashy, but it is very consistent in my opinion. It just has its good matchups and it just has its bad matchups. Not poised to be like the best deck in the format by any means in my opinion, but it will be a good deck and it will be a welcome return to red in the format. So I think like every color is playable for the most part. If I had to pick the weakest, I'd probably go with yellow as the weakest, but you know, yellow had its time in the limelight for a very long time in Dragon Ball Super. So this is what I'm thinking, guys. I want in the comments below what you are thinking about this. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.